Hello, I'm back. It's Sarah. I should cough before I start the thing. But anyway, okay, the next step, after you've gotten all your supplies and everything, the first thing you want to do is get these patterns off the wood, because generally what I would have, you would have your pattern like on a separate piece of paper, like from this book or whatever. You wouldn't have to worry about this part because this comes with the pattern on the wood. Generally the wood would be plain. So all I did was I laid both these pieces on my scanner and just scanned it, and I got the printout, and then I was able to go ahead and base coat. So if you want to, then the next thing you need to do is to trace the pattern, but we're going to do that while we're letting this dry. We're going to go ahead and base coat real quick, and then we'll come back and trace the pattern. But before you base coat anything, you got to get that pattern onto a piece of paper or trace it or something, because you're going to lose it if you paint first. So just going to set that aside. Ooh, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, camera. So in order to base coat your piece, I'm going to have you just, you can just take, I actually went to my stash and I grabbed a bottle of blue, because I just figured I'm going to do a lot of these. I didn't want to have to, hi Kirby, I didn't want to have to use up all that blue base coating. But you're going to take about like a dime size of paint. You don't need a ton. And about the equal amount of all-purpose sealer or varnish or something that you're going to mix into the paint that's going to make it seal the piece. So I'm not a scientist. I don't know the correct reasons why. I know there's polymers in paint. I know there's plastic. You shouldn't rinse it down your sink. That's what I've always heard. And I'm just brush mixing this, and I actually use an old grungy brush that I have. I never really use a good brush. This is like my what was her name? Judy, oh no, what was her name? The one stroke lady. Anyway, her brushes are used to having a lot of paint in them, but this is covered in paint, and I base coat with that a ton. But all right, so the first thing you're gonna do, just take your raw wood. Let me make sure, I don't know if I'm gonna put this on the shirt. Take your raw wood and just load your brush up with paint and cover this. Cover the piece with paint. That's it. So this actually is going to be sanded. I forgot to mention that in the supply list. I'm sorry. That's my bad. But I have a little piece of fine grit sandpaper right in my drawer that we use for paper crafting too, you know. So anything that can just be to get this, you know what, I don't think I mixed enough paint. Kirby, you're making it difficult. Get down. Sorry, I love her, but she's just interfering. Her little head is like sticking up onto my desk. I think she's looking for a Q-tip. She likes Q-tips. So you guys would mix a little, maybe a quarter. Mix a quarter and a quarter. Like a size of a quarter. Do you know what I'm saying? Like money. And then base coat your piece. I'm really not worried about it. If you don't seal this, it's fine. But in general, when you paint a wood piece, you do want to seal the wood, because, like I said, you want to have the best surface available. It's gonna, if you do all these techniques and you're on a bumpy, not sanded surface and stuff, it affects what the outcome of the whole piece looks like. So in order to get the best result, you start out with the best surface that you can. So I'm gonna finish this off camera. I just wanted to show you. It's just like, I do a nice slick coat. I try not to leave ridges on there. Like, you don't want to put your paint down and leave big ridges. So just kind of go over them. But I would go around all the sides and cover that completely. And then set it aside to dry. Now, I have one that I've already done. I'm just going to put my brush right in my paint bucket. And I don't know if you can see this, but it definitely brought the nap of the wood up. So this is one coat. This is just like what I did to the other one, but it's very rough. The surface is rough. So I'm going to take my, what do I have here? I have, this is very extra fine, I think, 400 sandpaper. That's really fine. This one's, I think it's still considered fine, but it's 320. You know what, I'm going to use this one, the 320 right now, because I just don't know how it's going to do. And I'm going to just take it off camera, and you can hear me just sanding. Yeah, it's definitely pulling off more. Like if you hit the edges, it's going to leave your edges raw. But I am going around the edges because those are rougher. And in general, a lot of people would have sanded their piece before even painting it. But I hate the sanding. I hate the prep, all the prep work. I hate that. I like to actually get down to the details. That's my favorite. So anyway, all right. So I got her nice and sanded. So I'm just going to come back, just brush it off a little bit. And now it's absolutely smooth. And I have taken off a little bit, like some edges, because it was a pretty thin coat of paint. But for your second coat, you're going to go in with just paint. You don't need sealer anymore. Now this is sealed, and so I'm just going to put a little bloop more on my palette, and I'm getting my brush and just going to blot some water out of it. So this is how you do your paper towel. So I just kind of push down and blot. So you want water in your brush because that makes it nice and slick, the paint. You don't ever really want to go to your painted piece with just straight, like go straight to the paint with a dry brush, because it'll be too stiff. You need the paint to move on the piece. So I mean, you could even add a little bit. Oh, I think there's a hair in there. Perfect. But you want it to move. You want it. I'm actually. I think this. No, that's good. That's good. Nice and creamy. Not quite watery, but creamy. Like what's a good consistency? I'm gonna run out of paint again. My goodness. But if it feels like the paint is not slicking, like sliding across the piece, add a little water to your brush, because it's better to have 2 or 3 even thin coats of paint than I'm going into my water, because I'm gonna try and gather up some of this paint with my water, like water it down and get everything that's left here. Alright, and I'm going to turn my piece. Always turn your piece, because it just helps you get into those nooks and crannies that you might not be able to reach. This is a small piece, so have no problem getting into there. So, okay, so now look at that. That's nice and smooth. And you may need to do another light sanding. Just lightly sand. We don't want to take off any paint the next time we sand, but we want to make sure it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to set that aside and let it dry. And we're at 8 minutes. I think I'm going to continue on and splice these two together so that, because we're on the same subject, I just want to get the piece prepped. This is base coating the piece and getting it prepped. So the next step, once all that's dry, I have one that's been painted twice and it's sanded. And the next step is, okay, well, while you're waiting for drying, you're going to trace your pattern onto tracing paper, which I've already done, so I won't do that on camera, but I'm going to show you. If you, well, I don't have one that's not painted now, but if you wanted to skip this part about getting it onto your, all right, hold on, I'm going to come back because I'm 9 minutes. Be right back. Okay, if you wanted to just trace directly from the wood piece, that's fine. I just happened to put mine under the scanner, and now I have a nice flat surface to paint, to trace on from, because it's easier, you know. So, and since these were such little pieces, I could do that. So you basically take your tracing paper and you just lie it across the pattern here and just trace over the lines with your pencil. You can pick and choose if you want, not pick and choose, but I opted not to put these circles on her face because I'm going to do a different technique for blushing her cheeks. I opted also not to draw the circles from the bee because I ended up putting stickles on there, kind of like in a veiny pattern. And I also didn't put the face on the daisy this time. I think I might do it this next one I make. And I freehanded the faces on these, so these aren't the same tracings. But you can trace every detail if you want to, if you think you're going to use it, because that is going to become your tool then for when you go to your piece. So now I'm going to put my pencil down and I'm going to pick up my stylus, because the next thing we do is we're going to, once everything's dry and you have lightly sanded it, make sure it's nice and smooth. Mine is nice and smooth. I'm going to grab, and I said this before, well-worn graphite. Look at this. You can tell. I mean, I've traced a lot of things with this. If you happen to have a brand new piece of graphite, that's fine. Just know that you may get smudges on here and all types of things. It does not matter. We're going to erase the graphite off on afterwards. After we base coat, all that graphite will either be covered with paint or it'll be, we can erase it. I think there's something called mineral spirits too, that if you stick a Q-tip in the mineral spirits, that'll also take off your graphite. So now I'm just going to arrange this on my piece with a little smidge of room around the edges, because that's how she was. Remember, she wasn't right to the edge. I'm sorry, I'm sniffing. I have a cold. And that fin is not on the piece. There we go. And just hold it down and make sure you're only tracing where your graphite is, because I've done that before and traced a bunch of stuff and there was no graphite under it. Also, make sure that your graphite is the right direction, facing the right up or down, because you won't get any lines if you are upside down. So look. Yeah, that's there. That you couldn't see. But I'm not going to trace the goldfish. It's a sea starfish. I'm not going to trace that at the moment. I'm going to wait and put that on after, because it's just easier. I don't want to have to paint around that little starfish. I just want to paint her hair nice and solid. And then we'll come back and put it on after we've painted the hair. Oops, it went off. This does not have to be perfect. This is your guidelines, and all this can be erased. So don't sweat this. This is just getting your pattern on the piece. All right, and I'm not going to do the whole thing. So I'm going to take that away and show you what I've come up with. Now, you know my graphite is well worn. See, I came off the piece here, but I'm going to erase that. And so you have some pattern on here to get started with, all right? I guess I'm going to cut away and I'm going to come back and all this will be done and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so she's all traced on now. You'll notice that I did leave off, like I said, the little starfish. I did put the big starfish on, and that's personal preference, because you could paint her whole body and then add on, see I missed a little spot there, then add on the starfish after. But I did, the other one I did this way too, so it wasn't too bad, and I think you can learn to fudge around things. You leave off the face details because we're going to base coat her face, and that's the other, I think I mentioned, we're going to need flesh tone color. Now, if you just want to paint her green, yellow, white, pink, orange, I don't care. You can still do the techniques with any color you use, but I am going to be using flesh tone. I just happen to have it in my stash, obviously. I mean, I've got every color practically in my stash, but this is just dark flesh is what we're going to shade with, and flesh tone is what I'm going to use for her. I mean, you can make her brown skin. You can make her, you know, whatever color you want. I'm going to mix for this I'm letting this dry up. Next video I'll come back and everything will be ready to go to paint both of these. In case maybe you didn't get the mermaid or maybe you didn't get this one, we're gonna alternate and go back and forth. I'm gonna use a mix. This one I used flesh tone for the center, but I think I'm gonna mix the light brown with a little white so that everybody's got these colors they need. We could probably do her flesh tone with like a little bit of what am I trying to say? Light brown mixed with white, and see how that turns out. I mean, you can fudge it. So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna get everything prepped and ready to go for us to start coloring this in. And that's called base coating. We're gonna get at least 2 nice thin coats of color on everything. Red on her hair. I mean, you can make her hair blonde if you want, or brown, or whatever, black, I don't know. I'm going to do green for her body, and we're going to mix some orange and white for the starfish. So I'm going to pause this now, or stop now, and make probably part 2, which will be called base coating. So that was considered prepping your piece, and now we're going to go into base coating. Okay guys, thanks for watching.